Oikonomia Scholeia is the name, the title for another way of thinking, the economy, the nomos of the oikos, in which we dwell and die. I'm going to read a short piece on this new discovery thought path that I'm embarking on. But very briefly, by way of background, I'd like to say that I studied economics at university. I did what they call in Italy Economia e Scienze Sociali, economics and social science, as if economics weren't a social science, which the equivalent in the UK or in the US would be PPE, philosophy, politics and economics, but the focus in Italy was very heavily on economics. And during that time I wrote a substantial thesis also on Friedrich Hayek and his reinvention of liberalism, and came in touch with also other ways of philosophical ways of thinking economics. And what I'm embarking on now, and I'm inviting others to join me and show their work and share their work with me, is to leave behind critique. I can't hear any more critique of capital. It's done. Right? If you stay on the level of critique, you can criticize forever, but you will not go anywhere with it. And we have no understanding of what a sincere economy that has the human being at heart and in mind and in spirit is. We cannot found a new economy. And this kind of Spinozist, pseudo-Kantian, there's no way out from capital because capital is exit, etc. That is something, this kind of defeatism, I think crudely misunderstands time and space and capital itself, basically. So the time for critique is over. We now need to start working on a new nomos and a new oikos. And this is what I'm calling for an Oikonomia Scholeia. Of course, an economy grounded and founded on and in scholé. We need to stride towards other shores, new horizons, and that means ways of being. And for this, we require to think after another oikonomia. So I'm calling upon all genuine thinkers to contribute to this other theoria of economy and polis. I invite you to reach out to me if you're already active in your pursuits in this regard and share your work with me. There's a contact form down below, so please get in touch. All critiques of capital are bound to fail, for capital, as some have noted, apparently is itself critique. Hence, why would one even continue to critique capital if that is capitalistic at heart and actually reinforces capital? This is especially the case, perhaps, for Marx, whose analysis of capital does not wish to dismantle any of the operations at the heart of the machinic enormous wheelwork. Instead, his critique has the sole intention to reinforce the operations of capital while at once exiling spirit to the desert, supposedly in the hope of the inherent contradictions of capital to lead to communism. Of course, Marx is already at the very edge of what metaphysics can think, and hence all that he has left is to invert. Nietzsche did that explicitly when he says that his thinking is inverted Platonism. In Jean-Paul Sartre we have another example of an inversion of metaphysics when he places existentia before essentia in the noumenal realm from which supposedly the subject posits itself. What this generates, of course, is an inverted world. A world of the upside down. All critiques of capital, I'd say it again, are bound to fail, which means they're bound to succeed within the shadow play of mirror dialectics. Their success means to secure also their own role as crucial reinforcers of the status quo and within this play. That means, to say it very bluntly, all critiques of capital have it hard to secure their role in the mirror play of dialectics. So how are we to think up today and for this century and the centuries to come, which of course we can choose to keep on fighting these nonsensical ideological battles that lead nowhere, that are part of the mirror dialectic, or we could free ourselves from this shadow play. So we think up and weave another founding of the economy, however remote and removed from us in this time it may appear. There is another realm, other fields and pastures that are open, that are lingering, that are waiting only to be thought again and to be dwelled in again. The fields of Oikonomia Scholeia, grounding and founding itself in scholé, which is the measure of sufficiency above all. To ask for the economy that is to arise from within the currents of this our time, of going down and under, means to be able to go over and beyond and stretch backward to what was ahead of ourselves. What is the oikos that is built in accordance with the nomos, for which we must ask at once? There is no economy without nomos, and no nomos without ethos, no oikos, no house, no dwelling, no homestead without those, and no oikonomia, at last, of course, one that has completely exhausted itself. Without the measure of sufficiency, which brings into balance, ever only for a while, the bursting out multiplicity and many unfoldingness of what is weaving through the web of light time. There is no balance or equilibrium to be reached. This is not what I'm saying. But there are momentary balances in the tempest of the elemental forces that we can give form to. And that is the task. All economic models play with time, but they misunderstand time. The oikos is the home ground, nomos, the law, and hence that which posits and places from within the webs, cobwebs, weavings of the multiple planes of the human. Something is coming to its end. The very epoch to which we are still heirs is shifting into another. The economy of Scholeia. These are the modes of being and pastures. This land, which shall be our horizon, is the meeting place for the dancing, momentary balance between the old and what is to come. The insanity of the economy of our time is encapsulated in its two fundamental principles. The principle of scarcity, or more precisely, of lack. The lack of natural resources, supposedly coming all to an end. The lack of human resources, the lack of capital, etc., underlies all operations of the economy. Hence the need, the drive to produce more. Because there is scarcity, so goes the myth, there is the need for overproduction and overconsumption, funded and fueled by debt and credit. Credit and debt, of course, are bets on time, and with time, plays with time. They make a certain imagined future financially available in the here and now, in a linear understanding of time, and hence these bets gamble with, which is also now becoming apparent with derivatives, and bets on and upset and set up the future. A process which for some decades now has only been possible to maintain through the invention, for example, of synthetic loans and bets called derivatives, which serve to secure the previous bets on time. So you can see kind of a hellish wheel we're in, by further carving into and exploiting futural time as a mere resource. But the future, now entirely sterile and barren, is closing fast. Predicated on lack in all attempts to reach sufficiency, predicated on lack, all attempts at reaching sufficiency are futile. And any claims that sufficiency can be reached thus are tantamount to Baron Münchhausen's claims to be able to pull himself out of quicksand. That there is at the heart of what is and shows itself the nothing or the naught also must be thought specifically. But to claim lack or scarcity is a reification of nothingness. Building on this quicksand, the cries for eternal growth, or let's say what they call for is exponential growth, of course, which never dies out, are to taper over the lack not at the heart of the true oikonomia, but at the rotten core of the ossified, crippled, and decaying time zone we have gambled away. This is the second principle, is supposedly the possibility for exponential growth. At the same time, there is fundamental lack of everything. The recent calls that are getting louder for an end to growth and so-called sustainability are calculative rationalistic attempts to restructure the debt, which is a black hole of the future, and finally enshrine nature as a mere gas station, or petrify nature as a mere gas station, perhaps that's better, without fruitfulness of her own. The will to exponential growth is the affirmation of the explosion that destructs the nomos of the human household. There is no sense to it, no end or purpose, but solely the will to explode and exhaust further and further any and all limitation. This, our age, as Goethe laments in his Maxims and Reflections, is unholy, unwhole, since nothing is allowed to come into its own. Nothing is allowed to ripen in its own time. Meaning does not flourish. A great forgetting which set in centuries ago, and now the reckoning is coming. We are living through it. We have forgotten who we are. We who do not yet remember who we have always been. This time we allow ourselves to ripen. And this will only happen through thinking. Goethe here continues, quote from Goethe, "The activity of commerce, the rush and rustle of paper money, the swelling up of debts to pay debts, all these are the monstrous elements to which in these days a young man is exposed." End of quote. What is debt other than the utter abyss, the black cloud of a future already lost, which sucks us empty and leaves our world void of meaning? We must not underestimate the warnings of time through credit and debt at the scale of which these are available. The warning of Goethe. All too easily, this can be turned into a moralistic debate denouncing usury and interest on money. What is usury? What is interest on debt? How do they gamble and interfere and even warp time? Those are the questions that perhaps we need to ask and think after. The German word for usury is Wucher. The word Wucher has Indo-Germanic roots, which mean to grow, to enhance. In the old High German, the word Wucher also means fruit of plant and animal, and offspring and progeny. There is an apparent connection to the old German adjective Wüch, which meant üppig. That means abundant, exuberant, lush. Wucher does also mean yield of fruit. But from the beginning, this phenomenon of yield is related to usury also and interest. The Greeks already knew the phenomenon tokos, earning interest on capital from yields of crop without oneself doing any work. Growth and usury, it seems, go together. Of course, they are not always together, but there is, in any attempt of having growth, there is also already usury there as a possibility. Not as a necessary possibility, but it is then possible also. They seem to belong together. But of course, they are also separate. And I'll say it again, though, that there's a connection between Wucher, which is usury in English, with abundance, exuberance, richness, fruitfulness. So I'm not calling here for anti-growth, but for another understanding of growth. We must think after this phenomenon of Wucher, which means both fruit and yield as well as usury. They belong together and they do not. They meet each other and they are still separate. They are of one origin but diverging phenomena, battling while also collapsing back into one another. How can we think growth and the use of usury in harmony with another understanding of time? And with a basis, again, in scholé, in founding sufficiency. Is there a measure on the earth, to quote Hölderlin? Usury, outside moralistic concerns, is in its prevalent formation an existential trap, a tempocidal destruction of all genuine access to time and tidings, the petrification, even destruction of our memory. The materialist response to the current crisis is to throw more money, more debt, more bets on the future into that abyss. The spiritual response might be a return to the sacred, so-called. Yet, what is the sacred supposed to be in an age in which the gods have flown and the Christian God is dead? We must think time anew, and hence arrive at another nomos of the oikos that is truly our own, an oikonomia of the future that is ours, of this century and the coming centuries, not of the ideological battles of old. For the debt we are handed down in our generation, the generations to come, that debt is what destroys and blackens not only the future, but also traps us in a frozen past. Even if all is lost utterly already, we still have the perfect duty to ourselves and our offspring to sow the seeds now and warp time anew, because that will never get lost, for other future generations, beyond the capture of the operations of capital, which is precisely why critique will not matter here. So if you are already doing the work here, reach out to me. If you are in a position to fund such a project, please also reach out to me. There's a contact form, a link to a contact form down below. Thank you very much indeed.